Learn and connect with exciting new opportunities. Are you ready for the next step?
Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this session, Lunch and Learn with MIT Digital Transformation. My name is Clayton Jones, and I'm Program Manager of CMET, which stands for the Centre of Excellence in Mobile and Emerging Technologies. It's my great pleasure to introduce you all today to Dr. George Westerman. Dr. Westerman is a senior lecturer with the MIT Sloan School of Management and is a world-recognized thought leader on digital transformation through technological innovation. He is also a principal research scientist for workforce learning in MIT's Jameel World Education Lab, where he works with educators and non-profit executives to transform the way workers develop new skills. Dr. Westerman has written 3 award-winning books, including Leading Digital, Turning Technology into Business Transformation, and is a pioneering researcher in this area, having published papers in the Harvard Business Review and other top journals. In today's session, Dr. Westerman will be discussing a leadership framework for seeking opportunities for digital transformation in your company. Before we start, if you have any questions during Dr. Westerman's presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat, and time permitting, we'll review those at the conclusion of the session. Dr. Westerman, welcome, and over to you.
Thanks, Clayton. It's so great to be here. I've never been to Wales. This is as close as I've ever been, but I've always wanted to go. So hopefully at some point we can do that and I can see the place not through a computer screen.
That'll be great.
So, thanks, everybody. Happy lunchtime. I just finished my breakfast and we've had a very beautiful snowstorm outside. So I've just got done shoveling the walks outside. And so my day is just starting and you're in the middle. Hopefully we can have a good lunchtime for you. So as Clayton said, I want to share with you a brand new paper we call the New Elements of Digital Transformation. We started this research back in 2010, put out, as he said, a number of papers, this award-winning book in 2014. And just this year, we decided to go back and revisit and see what has changed. And the surprising thing is, as digital transformation has advanced along, we've gotten so much better at the technology side. We've actually gotten much better at the management side. And yet people still feel like they're not working as well as they should. That even as people have picked up capability, the goalposts have moved. And so they still see there's so much more to do. And when we looked at this research, we found that our basic frameworks were still very much the same. And yet, because of the way technology has moved and because of the way digital transformation has moved, there are some small changes we wanted to make. So that's why we wrote this article. It just came out in this month's version of Sloan Management Review. So you're seeing this hot off the press. So, I want to start off just by talking about technology. This is the Emerging Tech Fest. This, technology is the endless agitator of the business world. It keeps moving. Every time I look at this slide, I realize that some of the pictures probably need to be updated because things have moved that quickly. Maybe a company isn't there anymore, or for example, the Google car doesn't look like this anymore. And I am not sharing my screen, am I?
Not yet, I believe.
How's that? Can you see my screens now?
Yes.
Much better. Good. Yeah, that would have been a very, very difficult talk if you couldn't see what I was showing. So, so we know digital technology is the endless agitator of the business world. You all know Moore's law because you're talking about emerging technology. And Moore's law says that technology doubles in power every 18 to 24 months. And that's a really interesting and scary notion for organizations because that's exponential. If technology is doubling every 18 months in power, that means every 5 years it's 10 times as good as it was before. It means every 10 years it's 100 times as good as it was before. And you only have to look at your mobile phone to see what that means about being 100 or more times as good as it was before from 10 years ago. But for organizations, that's a real challenge. And why is it a real challenge? Well, if Moore's law says technology is moves really quickly, I want to give you George's law, the Westerman's law. And that is something I know to be true, but we often forget it in a technology world. And that's this. Technology changes quickly, but organizations change much more slowly. Organizations just don't change exponentially, and adopting the technology is a lot harder than buying the technology. So what we have to think about in organizations is organizations don't get value from technology. They get value from the changes they implement because that technology enables it. And that means if we want to think about it a different way, in the world of digital transformation, digital is not the main problem. Transformation is. This is not really a technology problem, it's a leadership problem. And we forget that sometimes when we see all this advanced technology out there. We forget that organizations need to make this work in their organization. That's a very, very complex and difficult problem. And that's why my research is focused so much on the transformation element. How do you lead this change? So what I want to share with you here, oh, and by the way, if that wasn't enough, this rapid march of technology, the combinatorial aspect of technology, where it's not just one technology moving forward. Now we got to watch where's mobile and cloud and machine learning and social media, where are they all coming together to create new opportunities? As if that weren't hard enough, we then have this. And the various stories are out there, right? Did we do 10 years of digital transformation in 6 years or whatever? My favorite is this that was going around the internet a little while back. Who led the digital transformation in your company? Was it your CEO, your CTO? No, it was probably COVID. And certainly as a professor, we have this all, we see this, right? We're doing all of our teaching online and we're getting pretty good at it now. Uh, on the other hand, other places. My wife is a doctor, and they are really starting to figure out now what can they do physically, what can they do in a remote way, and some of their patients prefer the remote, uh, whether or not the doctors prefer it, and so they're working through that. I even have a friend who bought a house without actually ever being in the same room as the real estate agent. So the real estate agent still took his 7% commission, but they didn't have to drive around in the car all over the place. They just arranged electronic transactions for this person to buy a house. So many, many changes going on here. The question here is this, though. We changed quickly, but did we change well? And in many organizations, that fast run, the pushing on the IT department, driving the technology change, sending everybody home, um, we got there, but there's an awful lot of fixing to go forward. And I would argue you don't want to be fixing to go forward. You want to take this opportunity now to really rethink what you do. So you don't just go back, you go back better. And that's become kind of a trite statement these days, but a lot of organizations still aren't doing that. We're talking about when do we go back to normal? And what we really want to say is, given what the situations we have, given how employees are thinking about the world, how customers are thinking about the world, given what we can do with technology now, let's reinvent the way that we are thinking about our organizations. Let's find new ways to do this. And if you ever needed a burning platform to make changes happen, COVID is it. So let's take advantage of that. As hard as it's been to make this adjustment, now's the time to make even more adjustments as you go back. So what I'd say on that is here, did we change well? Well, now's an opportunity. Really rethink what we're doing, transform ourselves to the digital age. So as I said, we went back and we looked at our research from over the last 10 years, including this book here, and we came up with, we revisited and we found out some things had changed, but they're relatively minor adjustments. Most of our basic framework still held, and there were some updates we could put in there. And where the changes happened mostly was on the digital side, and I'll tell you why that's important right now. So the core framework of our research was this. We talked to thousands of, we talked to 151 leaders in $500 million businesses in 50 companies in the beginning of our research. We found a lot of companies doing a lot of things with digital, but very few doing it well. And the ones doing it well, we call them digital masters. And what we found with the digital masters is they're good at two things. They're good, yes, they're good at the digital capability, but it's not about buying the technology. It's about putting the technology into your business and making your business better because of it. But in addition to the digital side, they're better at the leadership side. They're better at envisioning and driving change over and over again with the business working in concert with the technology people. So you can have one or the other, but you're not going to get where you want to go. The digital masters are the ones that are winning in this world. Now, I said that, we talked to 151 companies. We then added a couple dozen. We then brought that up to added a couple dozen case studies, brought that up to more than 400 companies in a survey. We wrote the first work. We've now talked to thousands of organizations in our surveys and research. And this main framework is still important. And we tend to forget it over and over again. We focus here on the digital, not on the leadership the way we should. And what happens there, if you focus just on the digital, you're what we call fashionistas, doing all kinds of really interesting digital innovations, but they're not connected together. You got multiple technology stacks, you've got integration issues. And what we find is you drive revenue better, but you actually do that at a lower profit margin. We call these people fashionistas because they look all beautiful and digital on the outside. There's just nothing going on up here. And you know what I mean about the fashionistas in the world. Um, by the way, I said that, made that statement at a retail conference last year. I have to be careful who I say that fashionista statement to. So the conservatives are the other side, not a political statement. They're being so careful. They're doing governance so strongly that they're being too incremental. They're being too risk averse. And as a result, they can't innovate. And what happens, they are higher profit margins than their peer companies, but they're driving less revenue. And so those profit margins will not stay if they can't stay ahead of their competitors. Digital masters, 9% higher profits per unit of capacity at a 26% higher profit margins. So if your company is in a 4% margin industry, the masters are running at 5. If you're in a 10% margin industry, the masters are running at 12 and a half. And when you're billion-dollar companies, that's serious money. So that's the main framework. And what I want to focus on today is what we found is the leadership side really hasn't changed much. These core leadership principles are still important. What we've found, though, I've got some additional research on how to drive a truly digital culture to take this from being a project or a set of projects to be just a whole capability for the company. So there's that. The other side here, though, this has changed a little bit. Customer experience operations models, digital platform, we've seen more changes here as the industry has figured out what to do with digital. So what we have here is where to look for opportunities. And we see these opportunities in 5 areas. So if you are just starting a digital transformation, you can take these areas and use these as kind of a cookbook and say, I want one of those, or I want one of those. That's the idea of this framework. Or you can look at what you've been doing and start saying, well, I've been working in this area, maybe I can extend it to that area. That was the purpose of this framework here. So what I want to do now over the next 15, 20 minutes or so is to go through and walk you through these 5 areas, give you some examples of what these look like, just to provoke you as you're thinking in your own organizations on what to do. Or if you're a technology provider, to help your clients think about what they are, because they don't want to buy your technology. They want to do something differently in their organization. So you can help them think about what might work better for them. So why don't we start here with the customer experience? Actually, before we do that, let's start here with one other thing. I talked about the leadership side and the vision, the importance of vision and creating a vision and helping your organization adopt that and then steering it. So we talked about vision, engagement, and governance. Vision sets the course. Engagement is your gas pedal or your motor to drive you along. This is where people and your projects get you moving. And then the governance, that's your steering wheel. A little bit of the brakes, but it's your steering wheel. So your vision sets the course, your engagement drives you forward, your steering wheel keeps you on course, and you repeat that over and over again. Unfortunately, we find that too many companies, when they're thinking about digital, they're really not thinking about a big journey. They're thinking about just going next door to get a pint of milk or something like that. And it's not the same thing. I talk about it as you should be thinking about turning yourself from a caterpillar into a butterfly. But in most companies, we just see them thinking about being faster caterpillars. And that's just not going to get you there. We need to think bigger because your competitors are thinking bigger. And the organization will think it'll do the incremental stuff on its own. As a leader, you need to push that farther. So one way to think about that is to rethink what your assumptions are, your pre-digital, your pre-COVID assumptions. And some of the things that are here. Our customers really value the human touch. Well, even before COVID, that wasn't true. They want personal service. They don't necessarily want it from a person. And so certainly online retail has shown that, and we're seeing it now in COVID in many other ways. How can we give personal service without the person in the loop? We've reached the limit how far we can automate. Well, 10 years ago, that was sounding about right. And then the cloud and machine learning and mobile hit. And now we're just at the very beginning of what's possible with automation. Working as an integrated company will slow us down and stifle innovation. I will tell you that sounds right, and it is just wrong. Now, you don't want to be a completely integrated, completely standardized company, but every example I'll show you, they have a very clean platform where they clean up the mess, where they have the right things standardized, the right things shared, so then you can innovate around the edges very nicely. So this idea of we need to keep our silos needs to be thought a little bit differently. And one more, strategic assets that brought us success in the physical world will still be valuable? No, certainly COVID has shown this, but even before COVID, do you really need all those physical bank branches? Do you really need all of those retail stores? What should they be used for in the going forward timeframe? So we need to think that. One other thing that pops up over and over again, the regulators will never let us do that. That's an easy excuse. It's not necessarily true. I see in industry after industry, if you want to innovate and you tell the regulators what you're doing, many times the regulators will go along for the ride rather than saying no. But on the other hand, anybody in your company who wants to stop you from innovating, they can jump on this one. And you shouldn't let them get away with saying that. So let's jump into these 5 elements here. Number one is the new elements of the new elements is to think about customer experience. Now, customer experience, we certainly know a lot about what's going on there in the transformation, so I don't need to say as much about this, but number one, it's moved from being online to an experience. We need to think of engaging all the touch points we have with that customer into a way that they want to work with us. And certainly one way you think about it is, a day in the life of the customer. If we can walk in their shoes and see all the ways that we annoy them, maybe we can find a way to treat them better. What happens, by the way, each of those annoyances we create actually is a process failure on our side, or it's a silo on our side typically. And so by improving the customer experience, we often can improve our own way of operating. Customer intelligence is another one. The more we learn about people, the better we can serve them as individuals. And this idea of emotional engagement is becoming more and more important. Certainly the Starbucks is a heavy emotional engagement here. There's no reason you should pay that much money for coffee. It's pretty good coffee, but that's a lot of money you pay. And yet Starbucks is a really wonderful experience in many ways. And so it's the emotional side as well as the coffee side that makes this work. Gift Gap also, in the UK, you know who these people are. We don't have them in the US, but Gift Gap has such emotional engagement with their customers that their entire customer service operation is typically customers, not employees of Gift Gap. So when you think about it, how can you get to know the customer, design a great experience for them so you serve them well and so you know them better, so you build that emotional engagement. And if you get really good at this, you can serve each customer as an individual rather than as a segment of the market or as a generic customer, and then everybody wins. So that's the customer experience. Let's move on to operations. Operations is one of those ones that, it's operations. It's those other guys' problem. I'll tell you, operations is the most interesting and underrated source of digital transformation that I've found. Because if you get operations right, everything else becomes easier. If you get operations wrong, everything else is tricky. The other reason operations is such a really useful way to do digital transformation is the media can talk about customer experience. They sometimes can talk about your business model. They can't talk about operations, what you're doing in operations, unless you tell them. And so this can become a source of hidden advantage also. You can hide this, you can keep it to yourself in ways that you can't with your customer experience. So certainly you want to do core process automation, and I can spend days telling you about what I love about Asian paints and how they went from making paint in 13 regions of India to being integrated supplier of painting services, renovation services in 17 countries. That was an operations driven change that then led to other opportunities. Um, but then you have other elements here. Industry 4.0, these connected and dynamic operations. So Schindler, for example, they don't have to just run elevators for you. They can run an entire connected campus. So the elevators will speed up and slow down depending on what the volume is right now. So they can maintain things at the right moments rather than when they break. And Schindler's not the only one, right? And there are many, many other organizations doing this as a service and doing this connected way that, that makes life just so much better for you. Um, and then the data-driven decision making is really critical. These sensors, these systems are throwing off a lot of data. If we use it, we can do better. We can, like I said with Schindler, we can maintain it when it's needed as opposed to when a certain number of months have come by. Um, we can, at Flextronics, for example, the world's largest supply chain company for electronic products, they have enough data on how their vendors are working, on what's happening with shipments in different areas, that they can predict when problems are going to happen and reschedule their global operations so the customers never see it. And this is certainly on the operations side. It can also be certainly on the customer side too. You want to do this. Be much more data driven. That means having your data much cleaner and also being able to do much more real-time analytics on it. So the really critical part about operations is it is a wonderful source of hidden advantage if you pay enough attention to it. So we talked about customer experience. We talked about operations. Let's jump into another one here. Oh, I got to tell you this story. This is my very favorite research visit I have ever done. And I visited a lot of companies, but these people build aircraft carriers. And so the sheer scale of what's going on and the sparks flying all over the place and the just coolness factor was really interesting, right? So, these ships are something like 5 acres on the top of them. They take 10 years or so to build. Um, it's a big problem. And so what they did recently is they moved to digital designs, which it was surprising it took them till now to get to digital designs. But when you're building an aircraft carrier, blueprints are a little difficult to work with, right? Just even what they showed me was when that welder is there, that picture there, if he wants to go get a blueprint, he has to walk to the other end of the ship, walk down 5 flights of stairs, go to the place where the blueprint is, and walk back that whole way up. It could be a 20-minute round trip just to check a blueprint. So how often do people check blueprints? And so what they did is they went to the digital design, first of all, because that was that much more efficient way, but then they put it into operation. So for example, if he needs to cut a hole in that wall right there, he doesn't have to go look for the blueprint, or he doesn't have to guess. Look what that tablet is doing. Well, okay, over there, there's an electrical box. I don't think you want to drill through that. And over here's a pump, but anywhere beside that, go ahead. You can drill into that pump. That's pretty well cased, and you're not going to go that deep on it. Or you can go anywhere else. They're avoiding problems. They're avoiding errors before they happen. They're also giving better instructions. So you imagine running wires along. These tablets can help you to run the wires better. Another thing that happens though is that as you run these wires, when your shift ends and the next person picks up, they know exactly what's happening. So the handoffs are done automatically. They don't make errors. And what's nice about that is now if I am an electrician or a plumber working on 1/10 of a run of these things, because these things are that big, every handoff works. That means if I do it, it's not going to break later. And that means I'm going to take more care in what I do because I know that I'm part of something that's actually higher quality. And what they're finding here is that that by using digital in the operations in their shipbuilding, not only are they having fewer errors, not only are they having fewer injuries, because, for example, if a box is red, you have to call a friend to pick it up. Where if the box is green, you can pick it up yourself. More quality, more efficient, fewer injuries. Employee experience is better. Employee satisfaction is better. They take more pride in their work. They show up to work more on time. So you think about that as a simple operational change, but so much more there. even training people, just so much better in this case. So that's operations that extends to other things. And why did I want to say that? Because the next piece was a brand new element that we had not really emphasized in our earlier research, and it's become very important over time. This was one box out of 9 before, and we realized that it needs to be its own area. That's the employee experience. If you think about customer experience, employee experience is just as important. And in fact, happier employees make happier customers. And employees who are having trouble are not necessarily complaining employees. They are actually really good symptoms of processes that are broken. And so we're seeing more and more attention to a day in the life of the employee, or just getting the employee experience right. Excuse me. So I talked about what that meant in the aircraft carriers. It happens all over the place. That if we get the employee experience right, things get better. And so we see that all over the place. Newport News. There was one bank in Singapore, DBS Bank in Singapore. They said something very simple. They said, we want to make banking joyful. And what does that mean? Well, that means everywhere we make banking unjoyful, let's fix that, because that's a process failure that's either hurting the customers or hurting you. And over the course of about 3 years, they went from being the worst of the top 5 banks in Singapore for customer experience to being the best. Just by saying, where do we make you unjoyful? Tell us, and we'll fix that. And in fixing that, the employee satisfaction went up, the customer satisfaction went up, their numbers went up, and it was just a win-win for everybody around there. So how do we think about that? Well, one is augmentation. How can we help the employees do a better job because the information's there? And what I showed you with the aircraft carriers is a great one. But you can also think about, employees that are just doing their work, and you get the right kind of flags that say, hey, this thing's out of tolerance, let's do something. Or, hey, this customer had a problem last time they called in, give them a little special care. Just these little augmentations can really help the employees do a better job. And it's better for the company too, because fewer errors. Something else we want to think about, though, is this idea of future readying. That a really scary thing about digital transformation is that the jobs are transforming. And this means that employees may not feel they have the skills for what they need to do. And so we need to really think about how we get them the skills without sending them back to, a master's degree. Turns out this article over here, this Transformer Chief Learning Officer, we found there is a new model for learning and development organizations out there. And once again, I could talk about this for days too, but the key point is that, well, here, I have a slide on it. The key point is this. The Transformer Chief Learning Officers are thinking about 3 things. It's not about just developing skills. It's about developing the capability to change for the employee and for the company. The methods are changing also. They're much more personalized, atomized, digitized, optimized. What does that mean? The learning comes to you when you need it. You don't sign up for a course and in 6 months you take the course. You get it in the kind of way you need it now. And also the learning departments themselves are becoming leaner, more agile, more strategic. So that idea of future readying is becoming more and more important, especially with the rapid changes we're going through. And the last is flex forcing. This idea of gig workforce is great. Many companies are developing captive gig workforces, whether it's Target in retail or UPS in delivery or professional services firm like Ernst & Young. Alumni of their organization know their organization really well, and they can come back on a gig basis as they're needed. So employee experience is a big thing and very important. It has become important enough to become its own pillar of our framework versus 6 years ago when we did it. So we've talked about customer experience, operations, employee experience. There's one more, and then I want to talk about the foundation baseline under that. The one more is business models. And the really critical thing about business models is everybody thinks that they need to be the owner of a multi-sided platform business. Everybody thinks that they should be, and they're being told that they should be the Uber or the Airbnb or the Amazon or the Alibaba of their industry. It's a really nice thing to think about doing. I will tell you, if you try it, you're most likely going to fail. And why is that? Because just about everybody that tries it most likely is going to fail. This is really hard. It takes exactly the right strategic positioning. It takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of luck. So you could, if it makes sense for you, you can try it and you should try it, but not everybody should try this. And even if you are trying it, there are other things to think about beyond there. Okay. So certainly Alibaba's done it, right? Certainly Amazon has done it. Certainly others are trying. Klöckner, for example, here is in the steel business. Not exactly where you think about a multi-sided digital platform. But what they've done is they've invited their competitors there so that now this can be a purchasing platform for many people to use. And it seems to be working so far. So it is possible, but many other companies are just saying, you know what, I'm going to join somebody else's platform. Either because in China, that's the only way to get in the business. And so fashion companies joining the Alibaba and other platforms there, or because it just makes more sense to supply here rather than try to own the own industry. There are risks there, but you can manage those risks, right? But let's get beyond the platform stuff. There are other things you can do. One is digital enhancements. How can you just add that little digital angle onto what you're doing and change what's happening? So, for example, a few years ago, uh, Daimler Trucks just fixed the check engine light problem. When the light goes on your car and says, "Hey, time to fix it," now you can call Daimler and Daimler will tell you exactly what's wrong. Now, that started to happen in more cars recently, but it's a really interesting idea. Information is on the engine. The intelligence to say what's wrong is in the service area. All they have to do is get that information from one place to the other. But even better, what they've done now is they give you two choices. Hey, that's just no problem. It's a filter. When is a good day to come in? They're going to get their money. You're going to get your repair done, but it's at a more convenient time for you. Or they say, "Hey, George, I hate to tell you this, but your truck is going to explode in 100 miles. But luckily, in 30 miles, we have a service station there, and we know exactly what's wrong. And instead of losing your truck for a day or two, we're going to have you in and out of the station in 2 hours." They get their money, I get my repair, everything's done. Getting that one piece of information from here to there. So think about, where is that in your organization? Where do you have that situation where the information needs to get to one place to the other? Or other things, Hilti, for example, instead of buying the tools, they'll just sell you a subscription to any tool you need for a monthly fee. Other ones, Husqvarna is selling chainsaws, not selling chainsaws, but just if you need a chainsaw, you go to locker number 58 in this place. Locker number 58 opens and you get charged for only the time you have that, and then it goes back into the locker again. So these are very simple digital enhancements to what you're doing, and they work very well. And then there are the information-based service extensions, such as what Michelin is selling tires as a service. GE is selling engines as a service. The idea here is that what can we do to use that information to either improve the services we've got or to sell the service itself? So Michelin will not only make sure that your fleet has the tires they need when they need them. Michelin will also use the sensors on their tires to give you a full information on where every truck has gone in your fleet at all times. It's something that you might have wanted to know. They can do that for you. So yes, platform business is exciting. Think about what role you want to play there and whether you can do it. But what can you do to digitally enhance? Or what can you do to build these information-based extensions? Okay, so I've been quickly through 4 things: customer experience, operations, business models, and employee experience. I want to get to one other that we cannot forget. And that's why it's the 5th element here. Okay. And that's this one, your digital platform. None of this works unless your systems are making them work. And you can be a fashionista and do this thing on the side and integrate it with baling wire and string. It will cause troubles for you later. So what we are going to say is, if your architecture looks like that, it's time to change it. And unfortunately, in most companies, that's exactly what your architecture looks like. So what I'd say is, yeah, if you've got spaghetti, I have this course called Essential IT for Non-IT Executives, where we teach core concepts on leading technology from the viewpoint of a CEO or a CFO or a business unit chief. And so we can't, get into too much technology, but this analogy works for them. And so if you're on the business side, then maybe this will work. If you're on the technology side, maybe it's a way to kind of make your points clean. if your systems look like spaghetti, that doesn't work. You know that there's no way, if your customer data enters here, there's no way to understand where it's going to come out on the other side. It's harder to keep up. It's harder to bring back up if it fails. It's harder to secure it. It's harder to integrate it. It's harder to change it. We'd say move from a spaghetti, turn that into lasagna, right? Where you have nice, clean layers of functionality where you can follow what's going through. And eventually you want to push that to being ravioli, where you have chunks of functionality you can rearrange in however you need to make that wonderful dinner. So if that metaphor works for you, you go from spaghetti to lasagna and into ravioli. Actually, you want to get to Legos, but nobody eats their Legos. And so, if you stop at the ravioli, that's fine. As we think about this, though, there are three kinds of platforms we want to think about. One is the core platform. These are your back-end processes and systems that really keep everything running, right? And you've got to get those clean and as only as complex as they have to be. Let's just say it that way. Then you have your externally facing platform or platforms. These are the things that work for individual customer bases. Also for sometimes you've got supplier relationships that work. These are going to be much more fast, much more digital, and much more experimental. And they'll connect with your core systems in there. And you can make those things work better. And more data is becoming its own platform that you can do things for. So if you're in the technology world, you know exactly what I'm meaning. If you're in the non-technology world, this is a way to think about what you're doing. Same thing up here. There's an awful lot of technology. There are an awful lot of really interesting methods out there to get better at doing this technology, the digital and the IT better. Containers and cloud and Agile and GitHub and DevOps. If you know what those mean, that's great. If you don't know what those mean, you're probably hearing those words. The really critical point, though, is that things are getting faster and better and actually easier in many ways to do these things in a good, agile way. And you should expect that. But even more important, it's time to do better integration between your IT people, your business people, and your digital people. The world when you could just say, hey, technology people, just go do what I say, that world is long gone. And same thing on the technology side, the world where you could just take orders, that's long gone. We have not seen digital masters succeed unless the digital and the business and the IT people are all working very closely together to make this stuff work. Okay, so I just ran you through a very fast run through 10 years of research and this new article we've got. The conclusion is really simple. If this is the DNA of digital masters, you got to get the digital capability and the leadership capability. That's a challenge. The leadership capability, this vision, having that vision where you're going, engaging your people and you're doing your projects, governing. You want to change this now from being this continuous cycle of execution into a true culture where the organization can start to execute and innovate on its own with less top down. That's where we're moving now. And I've got an article on digital ready culture in Sloan Management Review on how you can get there. On the digital side, this idea, certainly customer experience operations business model have changed over the last few years, but the core principles are there. And if anything, they're accelerating. We're getting more examples how it works. Employee experience has become its own pillar. And the digital platform, just we need to pay even more attention than we ever did before. So with that, let me just say, now's your time, right? COVID has been a really difficult time for us, socially, of course, but also for business. This is an opportunity now as we think about moving to the post-COVID world to really think about moving your whole organization forward, not just moving it back to what it was. And hopefully these ideas I've given you over the last 45 minutes can really help you come up with great places where you can innovate and where you can drive real change in your organization. So with that, I think we've got 5 minutes or so for some questions. Clayton, are there any questions there waiting for us?
I think we might have to stop sharing the screen so that we can see the chat column, George.
All right. How's that?
Okay. doesn't appear to be any questions on there. I think.
Okay. So,
Oh, hold
hi,
on.
Greg has one. Hi.
Hello, Greg.
Hi, so I wasn't sure whether to speak or type then. That's my digital capabilities right there. Hi, thanks for the talk. It was a really good, interesting talk to have on a lunchtime. So forgive not having the camera on, but it's one of those days.
Oh, I forgot I was talking about lasagna during lunch, so hopefully I didn't make people.
We're all hungry now.
Yeah, I had that last night. I actually work with various different companies who have had to, for want of a better term, pivot due to COVID, as we were all talking about. Our organization actually works with industry in the film and TV and screen sector, as well as academia. And we're trying to work in a more dynamic way digitally and actually encourage other people to do so. And I just wondered whether, when I'm speaking to my projects who I'm working with, whether there is any specific signposting you would give them to say, here are the best examples of somebody who's digitized well, quickly.
Yeah, so the certainly what we see on the companies that have digitized well quickly is we see what they've done, but not how they've done it. And it's the first thing I would really remind them is this is really a leadership challenge. This is a transformation challenge, not a technology one. And that means that they need to have everybody involved, not just the technology people. So that, the idea of the 2x2 is critical, and we forget that all the time. And the reason I say it's so important is because no company is the same as any other company, even in the same industry. And so they're going to need to find ways to make this work with what they have and with their unique customers. You can steal ideas, you can look at other people's ideas, but in the end, you're going to make it work when you make it work with your unique set of assets and resources. And so it's got to be a leadership and an iterative innovation problem. So where to look for the ideas? Certainly, we have these stories in this article. There are many other really good articles out there, and so you could certainly, find examples from this industry or other industries to say, do you want one of these? But the right answer is going to be to take a few of these examples, throw them in a blender, and come out with that right digital smoothie for this company, and that'll be different than for others.
So from spaghetti, you get smoothie. This is like magic.
There we go.
Because some of the companies I deal with, they're SMEs, they're small companies, they're not large, and they're, for want of a better term, chipping away at the coalface on a daily basis. Discussions, I find it sometimes hard to influence because they're thinking I've still got to make the money I'm currently making on the current service I give. So that's what I'm trying to do, is help them to think digitally in a smoothie way.
So I think that, certainly, Greg, this is SMEs have a much tougher challenge there for a lot of reasons. One is they just don't have the resources to invest millions in these technology things. They may not have a giant technology organization also. So there's a challenge on just, is this harder? Often these SMEs have their founder still there. And so, if it worked for my grandfather, why doesn't it work now? Or maybe the grandfather saying it worked for me in the 70s. It's what's wrong now, right? So you have a little bit of that going on too. Even then, you can really start to say, look at these things that are out there. What might you do to make things better for your customer? Look at what the big bookstore chains did and what Amazon did to small bookstores. And that's happening in every kind of industry now. So there's certainly a need to change, but they probably would just not do it with the millions of investment the way that some of these larger companies have. They might get some external help.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Greg.
By the way, that's also the B2B world. When we started this research, the B2C world was doing a lot in digital, the customer-facing things. The B2B world, the utilities, the industrial suppliers were not doing as much. That's changing. This digital stuff is happening there too. We're not seeing as much in the media, but they've caught up, and everybody's making these changes happen now. Do I see individual work projects being outsourced more often because of remote independent workforce? It's a really interesting question. I have not seen the outsourcing happening so much, but it's a logical extension for what's going on. Certainly one question we have is, as our employees have been working from home, we're finding many of the employees, at least in the Boston area, are going to warm weather clients to do their work. And so I have a very good friend who's living on an island off of Florida right now and having just the most wonderful time as I'm shoveling snow outside, right? And that's happening over and over again. So that's one thing we're seeing is, are we going to be more globally distributed on our employees? Outsourcing is an interesting thing, though. Um, Employees are more than just workers. They know your business. And so you want to think also, what are those tasks? What are employees doing for us that a contractor couldn't do because they know us better or they have more loyalty to us? And we can think through that. So I think that's it, right?
That is it. All that remains for me to say is thank you very much, Dr. Westerman, for that. I'm sure everyone would have gained some great insights from your presentation. And I'd also like to thank everyone who's joined us today. I hope you enjoy the rest of day 2 of Emerging Tech Fest, and you'll join us for the 3rd and final day tomorrow. But for now, thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for joining the Emerging Tech Fest. Join us again on our virtual live sessions or watch us on playback anytime, anywhere.